Hi, colleagues. Thanks for taking the time to participate in our presentation on developing a lesson plan using the Assure ID model. My name is Jason Stafford, and for those whom I have not previously met, I am from Trinidad and Tobago. I currently work as a higher education administrator at one of our national tertiary institutions. Allow me now to introduce my colleague and co-presenter.
Hi colleagues, my name is Tracy Wright. I am also from Trinidad and Tobago. I'm an educator at a secondary school in Tobago, and it is my pleasure to share with you some of the ideas and discussions which arose between Jason and myself during the development of the lesson plan. The topic for the plan and the target audience came from one of my classes at school. The goal of the lesson was to ensure students were able to ask about the weather and describe basic weather conditions in Spanish, which would serve as a foundation for subsequent lessons that were part of the broader secondary school Spanish curriculum. The purpose of the plan was to support the achievement of the learning objectives by actively engaging the learners and allowing them to use digital skills to learn, and these skills they would have already possessed. Let us get straight into the details. As suggested by the Assure model, we began by analyzing the learners. These were my students, so I took the lead in this area. There were 23 students in the class, 17 males and 5 females. 20 of the students are of African descent, 2 are of mixed race, and 1 is Caucasian. We had to consider the fact that this one student was from a family of German immigrants with somewhat different background and experiences from the others in the class. However, in the end, we believe that she seemed well assimilated and did not require any special attention. Overall, our assessment was that most of the learners were similar in terms of their socioeconomic background and cultural experiences, and there was no need to develop different approaches for subgroups within the class. With respect to entry competencies, we consider that many of the learners performed below average in English language arts as it related to comprehension, grammar, and writing mechanics. Some also showed a limited attention span and were frequently disruptive in class. These students received remedial attention at school. These issues meant that we could not pack too much content into the session, and we would have to pay close attention to the pace of the lesson, ensuring students would achieve the objectives. We also had to work hard to keep students engaged in their learning. Previous assessments told us that there was a relatively even mix of visual, auditory, and tactile learning styles. We also recognized that many of the learners were not that interested in doing Spanish. We agreed that the lesson needed a combination of techniques, including the use of visual aids, verbal repetition, discussion of the topic, and an in-class activity. The session also needed to emphasize conversational Spanish and communicate the value of the language skill when traveling abroad. When looking at the objectives, there was a lot of discussion between Jason and myself. Our desire in writing these was to keep them simple and to ensure that they would clearly show what the learners would know and be able to do at the end of the session. The first objective was to ensure that learners could write and express orally at least 2 ways of asking the weather in Spanish. In the lesson, we would introduce them to about 3 different ones, but emphasize the 2 most common ones, which are ¿Qué tiempo hace? And ¿Cómo está el clima? The objective was at the base of Bloom's taxonomy and focused on whether students could remember the statements and how they were pronounced. Another one of our objectives at this level in the taxonomy required that our students would be able to write and pronounce 7 or more basic phrases which describe typical weather conditions using the verbs hace or está as appropriate. At the next level of the taxonomy, we located objectives related to ensuring that learners understood what the common phrases meant when they saw or heard them in Spanish. Finally, we moved to the next level in the taxonomy of applying knowledge and understanding. This required that learners describe weather conditions using combinations of the learned phrases and choosing when to use hace or está as appropriate. In presenting the phrases in the lessons, we would explain that assay was generally used with terms like sunny, cold, hot, etc., while ista was used with the gerund like snowing and raining. So let me turn back to Jason to discuss how we selected our method, media, and materials.
Thank you, Tracy. We decided that the lesson would be delivered via an in-class presentation. The lesson would be guided by a digital presentation using Microsoft PowerPoint or other platform. It would be prepared prior to the start of the session. We thought that this was the most appropriate method for the secondary educational setting and the particular dynamics of the class. Selecting the media and materials and deciding how they would be used was not a linear process. We found ourselves moving back and forth and making changes when we discussed what we would select and how it would be used. I relied on the expert advice of my son, who is only about a year older than the students in the class. More on that later. For media, we would need a multimedia projector and wireless remote so the instructor could move freely through the class. We also needed a laptop and a few quality audio speakers, which would be strategically placed to ensure all students could hear clearly the embedded video we plan to use to support the lesson. We also decided that we would use the online platform Edmodo and a virtual classroom, which was previously established for the Spanish class. We thought this would be ideal to manage an in-class activity where students would be required to develop a caption using at least 2 Spanish phrases to describe the picture and also submit a voice note of them saying the phrases. The session will be delivered in the computer room so that a desktop computer would be available for each student should he or she wish to use it. We ensured that there were enough for each learner. However, students were encouraged to use their own mobile devices once they had installed the Edmodo application on it. To ensure this didn't become a distraction, we would only allow mobile phone use after the in-class assignment was given. Wired and wireless internet would also be available in the room to allow connectivity for the desktops and mobile devices used. The Microsoft suite of applications, the Microsoft Voice Recorder application, and the internet would be available on desktops to complete the assignment, while those who chose to use their mobile phones could use other familiar apps such as Snapchat or WhatsApp to complete the in-class activity. Some of our materials included the digital presentation and a short YouTube video selected and embedded within the presentation to support the lesson. Tracy and I spent some time searching for appropriate video or audio content that we could engage the learners and reinforce the lesson. Eventually, we chose a clip on the weather in Spanish from the Deviant Standard School 2004 series of educational content. Have a look at a few seconds of the video.
Together with the verb hacer. After that, we'll check out how you can also use the verb estar to describe the weather. Finally, we'll show you how to ask others about the weather. The Spanish word.
That's a little bit of the video. We also selected 23 digital images depicting various weather scenes from generic content on the internet. These were saved and numbered to make randomly assigning them to students easy for the in-class assignment. We also included a paper-based worksheet listing various weather expressions which would be covered in the class. As an assessment, students would be required to complete the blank spaces provided on the sheet. Printed copies of the presentation and the images would also be available in the event of technology failure. The digital presentation would include the title of the lesson, the learning objectives, in student-friendly language, of course, some of the common phrases in Spanish which ask about the weather, basic phrases which use the verb hacer or estar, and explanations of the different uses, and the YouTube video. It would also include slideshow of the images which would loop at the end while students did the in-class activities. The laptop, projector, desktop computer, and connections were all set up and tested prior to the session to ensure that they work as expected. Printed materials would have to be on hand and available for distribution. A copy of the digital presentation would be posted on the Edmodo class webpage prior to the session, and the assignment submission portal would be created in Edmodo. The selected images were placed on each desktop being used and also posted to the virtual class page in Edmodo. All students were required to sign in and were part of the virtual class on the Edmodo platform. Students were also encouraged to install the Edmodo application on their mobile devices and told in advance that they would be allowed to use them for an in-class activity. Recognizing that there were several different learning styles, we included a combination of techniques, including the use of visual aids, verbal repetition, discussion of the topic, and the in-class activity. Finally, students students were required to do the in-class activity. We wanted to use technology to find an engaging way for the students to demonstrate achievement of the learning objectives and use their digital skills that they already had. This was where our expert 15-year-old came in. He advised that most students in that age group use Snapchat or WhatsApp to communicate and create content on their mobile devices, and suggested that if we wanted to engage them, we should try to incorporate it in the assignment. I think it's best we hear him explain and show how it could be done. I didn't give him much notice before I recorded this. Have a look. Hi, Malik. You know I'm working on a project for school, and I need to know how easy is it to select a random image, insert in caption a description of the weather on the image, and upload it to the Edmodo page I created. It's very easy. How easy? Travel to gallery, select it. Right. Snapchat. Say the caption. What is the caption you're putting on the image? I'm putting that it's sunny and birds. And in Spanish that is así y bueno. So you put the caption on the image. No, you will share. Okay, so you go to the Edmodo app on your phone. Yes, now we dive to the assignment. Weather in Spanish. I created an assignment for weather in Spanish. Start with here. Now I submit. And we're done. Thank you very much, sir. Yeah. Okay, great. I think the way we decided on this approach was interesting because it highlighted the need for educators to collaborate with learners when developing instructional content. Let me now hand over to my colleague Tracy to talk about the assessment and review process.
Thank you, Jason. So in the assessment and review process, the worksheets will be collected and each student submission evaluated. Feedback will be provided via the Edmodo virtual classroom. The instructor will assess the extent to which the submission demonstrates achievement of the learning objectives and also note students' level of engagement during the session. Together, these will inform revisions and improvements for the next lesson on this and similar topics. And for the conclusion, yes, we believe that the lesson plan demonstrated how the Assure model was applied or can be applied to the secondary school context in Trinidad and Tobago in the teaching of the foreign language of Spanish. We used a lot of various media and technological tools, including Snapchat, YouTube, Edmodo, PowerPoint, tools such as the audio speakers, multimedia projector, laptop, desktop computers, the internet, and even mobile devices. We believe that the approach can definitely allow learners to use and achieve the learning objectives and use some of their current digital skills in the educational setting to promote learning and teaching outcomes. I invite Jason to make some concluding remarks.
Thanks, Tracy. I agree with you. One of the things that stood out for me in designing the lesson plan was also the importance for educators to have a plan B. We experienced some challenges in terms of preparing our presentation and uploading it. And I also enjoyed having a discussion with my son, who's of similar age, and finding out how learners learn and engage with the technology in the classroom. And I think that that's important for us as educators. So as we're about to close, on behalf of both Tracy and I want to thank everyone for joining in and to let you know that you can email us at our email addresses that you should see below if you have any questions or comments about our presentation. So I want to sign off now and thank you for listening.
All right, thank you very much.